Hey everyone, welcome to this week's video. This project didn't go exactly as planned at the beginning. The beginning was great because I got to get outside and go explore some nature, which is my favorite thing to do. But the trees did not turn out exactly how I wanted them to. I was able to readjust halfway through or I guess at the end, and just kind of go from there. And I actually got a pretty awesome result, and I'm very pleased with them. I'd be interested to know what your philosophies are on using trees on your encounter map. This is my personal one that I think is going to work best, but I hope you enjoy. Let's take a look. All right, well, found a bunch of stuff, probably really great for trees and logs and maybe some bushes. All the stuff out here is just already kind of fallen over. It almost looks like, I don't know, like some of it might have been burned. I don't recall there being a fire out here recently, but some of it might be a little too brittle, so I'm gonna drive somewhere else and see if I can find some that isn't quite as brittle. But yeah, I got some really good pieces at least. First thing I needed to do was find some good tree trunks, and I did that by cleaning them first. There was a lot of really loose, stringy bark on these pieces of sagebrush that they needed some cleaning. There was also a bit of charredness to them, like they were been in smoke, and also some interesting moss growth. Some I think like orange lichen was growing on there, and so I got those all cleaned up and then started to trim off all of the smaller branches up top. I made sure to hold on to these because while I don't intend to use them as they grew on the actual bush, I do intend to reattach the ones that I feel are usable to go back later and add the canopy of leaves on top. It's just some of them really aren't really conducive to doing that, while others are, so make sure you hold on to the ones that you want to keep. And then I brushed off some more here after I got all of the pieces removed, because I could get to it now with my brush. After I had about 4 or 5 tree trunks ready to go, I started to go through all of the clippings to select the ones that I felt would be the best to reattach to the trunks to kind of create the smaller, stringier branches that would lead up to the canopy and support the canopy of leaves. Now, as far as selecting these, you just want to find some that kind of have a number of them at the top of this, a number of smaller branches that is at the top, to where it's almost like a hand, an open hand that reaches up, and you can kind of put a canopy of leaves on top. Then started to glue on all of the smaller branches that I clipped and onto the main structure of the tree. I did this by using a gel super glue with some baking soda to start out, but then the baking soda didn't really kind of harden it as fast as I thought it would. I don't know why I thought it would do that. I swear I've seen that before, but I guess not. So I eventually just started using the accelerant that I normally use with super glue to get them to attach, and then would go back and fill in any big gaps with some more gel super glue, and then pour baking soda on top of those parts to kind of fill in and keep texture between the joints. This is a fairly straightforward process. You just want to make sure that you get the nice shape of a tree that you're looking for as you glue all of these on. I used a brush to dust off any of the baking soda that was left over, but just make sure that you kind of stay consistent and just look at a tree outside, or look at pictures of the tree online if you don't have any trees outside, and just kind of shape it after what you see. The next step was to use some poly fiber. This is from Woodland Scenics. It's just like a weird kind of cotton stuff. This one's green. You can also get brown if you like, because most of it's going to get covered anyways. You don't need a lot of it. You just cut a small piece and then you kind of like pull it apart and kind of tease it out to where it's nice and thin, because it actually goes a really long way. Then you just start stretching it over the top parts of the canopy where you attached all of your branches and where all those little small stringy ones are. You don't want to do one big one over the top because it won't look like a real tree. You just want to kind of do small pieces here and there to kind of build up a kind of, canopy up top, and make sure it's not too thick because you want to make sure that you can actually see some of the branches in between, and basically like air and light can travel through it. But yeah, you just kind of place them on there until you get it completely covered how you like it. And you'll notice I'm not using any glue to attach this. It's just being held on there by the branches, because eventually we're going to be spraying some spray glue over the top of it, and the glue will kind of bond it all together with the branches and it won't come off. I use some grab glue from 3M. It's like that kind that's really kind of rubbery almost. And then I use some coarse turf from Woodland Scenics. And this is the point where I decided I really don't like making these kinds of trees. It was kind of interesting. I tried to set up a little mini spray booth right here on my desk and then decided this is stupid because it's still getting everywhere. I could feel it in my arm hairs. And then I realized I was really hungry, and that's probably why I was super irritated. So I got some food and revisited it later and decided to take this project over to my dad's wood shop where I could do it indoors, because right now in Utah it's very cold and wet, and the wood shop is indoors and warm. But basically you just lightly spray the tops. Try to avoid, if you can, to get the glue on any of the branches down below. It's honestly, I don't think it's possible with the spray glue. But then you just kind of generously just kind of put the coarse turf on top and just kind of mash it in there, and then do a couple coats as you see fit. I ended up doing 3 coats, I think, and you also want to try and not get it on any of the branches when you're putting any of the coarse turf on. Again, very difficult, especially when you're trying to show good angles for the camera. So it gets all over that. You can pick it off later if you want, but honestly, it didn't bother me so much. Here's what they look like after you've got them all coated with the first layer, or I guess 3 layers of coarse turf. The next step was to gather up all of my coarse turf and return it into the jug. That's why I like to work with a bit of parchment paper underneath, because it makes for a great, easy, quick cleanup. Next, I use these really tiny leaves by Nock. These are kind of a brighter green color. And you just kind of do it again. You spray a little bit, even less than you did before, onto your leaves, and then you kind of just highlight the tops of them with these leaves afterwards. And it actually does give it a nice kind of look. It makes it look like there's actual leaves instead of just clumpy foliage. After you get that all finished, then you just want to do one last very light coating of this much finer turf by Woodland Scenics. This is the burnt grass, I believe, and you just kind of put it on top to kind of give it another kind of layer of light, or what looks like light kind of hitting the tops of the trees. Well, here they are, and I gotta be honest with you, I don't love them. The trunks look awesome, but on closer inspection, maybe this doesn't really show it very well, but there's a lot of gray from the glue, and yeah, I'm not happy about it. It could be the glue that I used, but the other thing is that they're really brittle. Like, see, that's broken. So is this one. It's stuck to my hand. They broke off of this one. So, as far as my purposes, these are great probably for dioramas and stuff. They're just gonna sit there and look good. But as far as like building and dismantling multiple encounter sessions, I don't think they're gonna work. So much so that I'm not even gonna finish the bases. So let's talk about the issues that I had with those trees. There was a few. For one, I mean, I like the way they look, minus the fact that the glue I used probably wasn't the best glue to use. Their edges of the
the leaves in the canopy were kind of had like this like white gray look to them, and all over the branches, the upper branches as well. It just looked dusty almost, and I really didn't like it. The other thing is that they were way too brittle. I think the sagebrush that I picked was a little too far gone, and it just didn't work out. The other thing is that I felt like they would really get in the way of moving miniatures across the encounter map. And that was a real big kind of issue for me, because knocking stuff over like that in the middle of the game is actually really frustrating to me. But the other problem is storing them. I don't have anywhere to store stuff like that. They would require like a shelf, because especially since they were brittle, I couldn't just put them in a box and then hope they didn't break. I kind of just like laid them on their sides on a random table in the mudroom that I have, and they broke just sitting there. So yeah, they're not ideal for storage. So what you're about to see is what I decided to do instead. I did 2 different types of trees, one from the sagebrush that I picked and one from 3D printing. And I like them both very much. So I hope you enjoy the rest of this video, and it's kind of been an interesting journey to get here. And but that's just kind of how crafting goes sometimes. Sometimes something you're really looking forward to doing doesn't turn out exactly how you want it to. But let's check it out.
So I got them printed, mounted, and primed. I have 5 different models of trees here, and I painted them all pretty much the same way. Started with a darker brown kind of base coat, and then painted the tops of them black to make it the illusion of that the trees keep going upwards instead of just being, chopped down trees. And then I lightly dry brushed in a variety of colors, moving up to a final wash. Now the wash always kind of dries a little bit shiny, which I don't really like. So then after they were painted, I made sure I went ahead and gave them a final coat of a matte varnish finish to kind of dumb down that shininess.
All right, so here they are. And the question right now is, are they too short? I mean, the point is just to imply that there's a tree there. But, I mean, if you stick a little guy here, they look really good. But if I take an enemy that I have, he is as tall as them. But I feel like it still works. The only thing is that I plan on using these trees in tandem with a lot of my other crafts. So like if I take one of my ruined pillars, for example, it's massive. You see, it's like way big. And it's way bigger than the tree, but actually, now that it's next to it, it doesn't really bother me looking at it. I thought it would, and yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I built these at 65 millimeters tall, which is, I had to shrink the size down because they were at almost 200 millimeters tall, which would have been close to this height here. But that's just a lot of resin, and I didn't want to use that much resin to print. Plus, they'd just be really, really tall, like this. But, I think it's going to work.
All right, got these back out here. Just thinking about doing something and undoing all the work that I just did. Oh, look, another one of them broke. I'm going to trim these and see what it's like without any of the canopy, and using them as an implied tree like these. So here we go.
Alright, so here's the tree. It's much taller. And by much taller, I mean like 10 to 15 millimeters taller. And compared to this guy as well, this guy's like the same height as this tree. Next to this tree, this thing actually goes over him. Works a lot better, I think.
Honestly, these kind of smelled bad. They smelled like outside, charred, wet dog kind of. So I baked them in the oven for an hour at about 215 degrees Fahrenheit. I then used some leftover plastic card scraps and used them for basing. It's an excellent material for basing because it doesn't warp when you glue things to it. But I just cut them into random blob shapes and then hot glued each piece right or each tree right onto it. Now, these branches, they needed a little bit more strength to them, so I coated them in a water and Mod Podge mixture. You could do this with PVA glue too if you like, but it's a pretty runny mixture and it just gets down in the nooks and crannies and helps them and prevents them from flaking off and things like that. I made sure to paint all the cut branches black just like I did on the 3D printed versions, and then I realized that these branches kind of had not a great look to them anymore. They had a lot of charred black bits and they didn't look very alive, and I needed them to, so I ended up painting them. I just did a bunch of different dry brushes across them, with starting with brown and then moving up to a light tan parchment color, and this mixing with the natural colors of the wood itself actually worked out really nicely. Sorry that I didn't paint in frame. It was only after everything was painted that they got the matte varnish finish, and this again was something to help bring down the shininess of everything, but also to make them more resilient to handling over time. It was then time to base everything, so I mixed up some Mod Podge and some water, a little bit thicker this time so it gets good coverage and doesn't just drip off, and then I just dipped them into my dirt mixture. You can find my dirt mixture on my grass tile video, so go check that out if you haven't already. I've used it a number of times in other videos as well, but this is a really awesome way to get some really nice looking dirt. I then took my grass mixture, which you can find in that same video, and I placed it in just a few spots. And I actually brought some of it up onto the trunks themselves to make it look like there was grass or moss growing up the sides of it. I then took that same water and Mod Podge mixture and dripped it all over the grass and dirt to make sure that it was hard and not soft to the touch, otherwise it would flake off. This is a very important step. Make sure that you do it if you want these things to stand the test of time. And then my final and favorite step was adding all of the embellishments to the bases to make them look like they are alive, they're full of life. So I used grass tufts, flowers, and even dry and green leaves to coat the bases. Also rocks and twigs and logs and things like that. Anything you can do to make them look more in nature, I think, is going to be really great. But that's going to do it for this video. I'll have a bunch of photos at the end for you guys to check out, to see how it meshes with all the other outdoor encounter pieces I've made. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Also, please subscribe. I'm getting closer to 1,000 subscribers, and that's my goal to get there pretty soon, hopefully by the end of this month. And share it with anybody you feel might find value in this video as well, or in any of my videos. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.